Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with someone who's branding very cool here with Destroy All the Monsters behind him, the t-shirt as well, and that is comics creator James Babbo. James, thank you for joining and absolutely make mine monster.
Oh yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. I know that we're going to be talking about a couple of books that you've worked on, Moses Militia being one of those from Comixology, The Punchliner, as well as Golden Girl as well. So delighted to be talking with you about those projects and anything that's on the horizon. By means of a first question, how did you get here? What led you to comics and creating?
Oh, I brought some some examples. What got me into comics when I was actually 3 or 4. My earliest memories are were going on Sunday drives with my grandmother to get her prescriptions, and we
Hmm.
would stop at this one local pharmacy on Long Island, and there would always be this rotating uh, uh, thing of comics, and I remember specifically the very first comic that my uncle bought me was Detective 410,
Hmm.
which was
Hmm.
I was spoiled. This is a Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams comic. It was actually turned into an episode of the animated series in the 90s, but it blew me away. I always looked at comic strips in the Sunday funnies, but seeing Neil Adams artwork in comic book form just blew me away, and it got me as becoming a diehard Batman fan
Hmm.
and into DC in particular. Uh, um, the second book I really got into was Legion of Superheroes because I liked it because it was standalone. It didn't cross over with everything else, and there were these young kids at this clubhouse, and they could all fly with them with this magic ring, and they had these crazy adventures. So I was really a DC guy until the 70s. Of course, my local library had those Stan Lee collections, Origins of
Hmm.
Marvel Comics and Son of Marvel Comics and Son of Origins and Bring on the Bad Guys. And I read those a lot, but it never got me to pick up the books. And then one day, again, I'm in a pharmacy. And at this point, I was in my teens, and I found this in a bin for 10 cents, Tomb of Dracula number 52. And I was a horror guy as I was growing up, watching Chilla Theater on Channel 11 and loving vampire movies. So I immediately got hooked on Tomb of Dracula and bought every issue I could find. And this is what got me into Marvel Comics. It was the Marvel Monster series,
Hmm.
which is why I got this T-shirt because I collected all these books: Man
Love
Thing,
it.
Werewolf by Night, and I'm very proud of this issue because I got the entire creative team. Eventually, it took me 30 years to get them all, but I
Mm.
got Gene Colan, Marv Wolfman, and Tom Palmer right before he passed away. All of them to sign this one particular issue, which is the first Marvel book I ever bought. And of course, now I have the entire series. But
Cool.
that's what got me into comics. And, I've got 10,000 issues now
Yeah.
of this obsessive collection of mine. But as a young kid, from 5 through 12, I would make my own individual comics. There was this book called Ed Emberley's World of Drawing, which
Hmm.
showed you how to make anything out of the primary shapes of a square, a circle, a triangle, a rectangle, and a stick. And you could make anything out of those shapes. So I started making my own Godzilla comics, Batman and Superman comics in these. I would take a sheet of paper, fold them into squares of 12 by 12, and I would just do these little comics. I made 42 of them as a kid.
Hmm.
And then I always intended to go to art school to be a comic book artist. But then I got sidetracked into getting involved in music with a number of bands. And to cut this down, in 2009, when the big recession hit and I got laid off from my job after 20 years. I had to buy a new laptop, and literally the very first email that I got when I turned it on was for a comic book writing course with Comic Experience, which is this online um, school that has a number of courses in drawing, in coloring, in lettering, in writing. And
Mhm.
I signed up for that course. The instructor was Nick Lowe, editor at Marvel, and the guest speaker is my current favorite writer, Garth Ennis. And I was like,
Mhm.
it's a sign. I'm gonna do comics. So I signed up for this course. I signed up for multiple courses where I learned all the different steps in production, including coloring and lettering and writing. I left the artwork to better people than myself and started collaborating and finding other people I could work with and started producing and self-publishing my own comics. I mean, I still send them to publishers, to editors to try and break in. I did have some minor success through my coloring. I did manage to do a couple of issues of Warehouse 13 at Dynamite.
Mhm. Mhm. I've seen that.
Um, but basically, I just work on my own stuff. I'm not fast enough to be a professional colorist to get a steady gig. Those guys I really admire. Chris Sotomayor, who was my instructor, the guy works these insane hours, but the man is incredible. And if he's able to do it, more power to him. I just cannot have that. I don't have the time. I'm not fast enough, so I will not make it as a professional colorist. I am very proud of the coloring I do on my individual books.
Mhm.
I will stack this up against, many books that are out there right now. I mean, you can't
Yeah,
really see
it's very attractive.
my
Yeah.
terrible camera, but um, I've gotten people that have wanted to hire me for my coloring, and I have to tell them, I'd love to do it. I'm not fast enough. I won't make your deadlines. So I continue to self-publish to do my own stuff, and just continue to send my stuff out there to the publishing world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned some of those threads of kind of your experience getting into comics as a reader, superheroes, monsters, things like that. Is there a particular kind of storytelling that energizes you most, a genre, a particular part of a genre?
Um, I re I really started with the horror comics.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and I talked to with Marv Wolfman about this when I was telling him how much I love Tomb of Dracula. What got me was his way of, for example, establishing a character. He will make you care about somebody in just a number of panels. Uh, Mary Smith was walking down a dark alley down the Lower East Side. Little did she know, while she was trying to bring groceries home for her family, it would be the last time she would ever be able to buy or particularly care about what brand of oranges to buy, because then Dracula would swoop in and kill her.
Hmm.
And it made me care about that person. I mean, nowadays I look at some of the storytelling, and they try to capture the reader as fast as possible with, very stylized art. But
Hmm.
I really don't see that layer of characterization and storytelling that people like Marv Wolfman or um, Kurt Busiek
Hmm. Hmm.
or even Jim Shooter with the Legion days, injected into these characters that made you care about them. A lot of characters that are big time sellers in the current era, I just can't get into them.
Yeah.
I won't name any, but they just don't grab my attention the way that these guys in the 70s did and the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah. There was something to that era and there was something to that storytelling. And I'm sure you can trace those influences in your work as well.
Oh yeah, I tried to make my characters interesting,
Hmm.
like for example with Moses Militia, my World War II book. I for a long time when I decided I wanted to do a World War II book featuring Jewish characters, resistance fighters, partisans, I resisted at first giving them superpowers because
Hmm.
I remember a line when Alan Moore was talking about the adaptation of From Hell. Uh, he they asked him what he thought of the film, and he said, "Well, I tried to make my investigator interesting, but I guess he wasn't interesting enough. They had to make him a psychic in the movie." Why you have to give superpowers to somebody to make them interesting, I don't know, but my characters, I know exactly where they came from. I know what towns they're from, what countries they're from. I know the kind of accents that they have. One's Lithuanian, one is from Brighton Beach.
Hmm.
I tried to come up with a backstory, even though a lot of it isn't covered in the book. But I leave little hints in there, like one of them talks about, the movies that he's seen, or where to get the best pretzel on the way to the subway, things
Hmm.
like that. Things that make characters interesting, that makes you care about them. And then secondary is, oh, this guy can shoot fire from his fingertips. That's cool. But
Yeah.
there's more to him than just that. And that's what I think is missing from especially comic book movies. They don't make their characters interesting that you would want to know them. You just want to know how much they can bench press.
Right.
That's
Right.
not really that interesting.
Yeah. You got to have more than that in storytelling for
I
sure.
mean, there's a reason why Ben Grimm in the Fantastic Four is the most beloved, one of the most beloved characters in Marvel. It's
Hmm.
not just the fact that he's super strong. The man has heart. He cares
Yeah.
about things. He cares about his family. He cares about what happens to other people. The guy wants to do good because
Hmm.
he that's how he feels in his heart. He just doesn't want to go around punching everybody if it's not the best way to solve a problem.
Yeah. True, true. That heart at the center of the granite that makes him a very cool and interesting character for sure. And curious about some of those connections that you've made person to person as you're working in the industry, as you're getting to know people. Any supportive collaborations that have been part of that journey for you so far?
The artists that I've worked with, they're just when you can jive with somebody and you share the same vision, it's incredible how you could see how they bring it to the page. Like, for
Hmm.
example, Bill Wiley, who works on Moses Militia, he worked in at Marvel in the 90s. He was one of Romita's Raiders. He worked on Deadpool. He worked on Secret Defenders, Web of Spider-Man. But I just sat down with him, not thinking we were going to work together, but we started talking about 1940s films, about how much we loved Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney.
Hmm.
And so I said, I want to do this World War II book. And now that we're talking about Bogart, I'd love to put a scene in there in Casablanca. And so there's a scene in here that immediately made Bill jump on the idea that the characters have a meeting in Rick's Cafe from
Uh-huh.
Casablanca.
Nice.
And I actually uh, I was freeze framing the film to take still shots so he knew exactly what to draw and everything. So that was cool, and he's dedicated to finishing the story. It's going to be eventually 9 issues. We're only up to number 6, but he loves it. He likes doing it. He won't charge me what he normally charges people, but he works on this because he loves the book.
That's
Then you've
cool.
got people like Antonio Brandão from Portugal, who I was so fortunate to meet online, who does Golden Girl and The Punchliner.
Hmm.
And this guy, Bill, will do what he thinks the storytelling calls for. Antonio does my scripts exactly the way I write them, panel for panel. He only slightly deviates from things, but he literally takes my scripts and brings them to life.
Hmm.
And when I work with these artists, I try to give them as much reference material as I possibly can. Every one of my characters I base on an actor. So to give them an idea, Golden Girl, I used one of the assistant DAs from Law and Order SVU. I can't think of her name at the moment, but I sent him a ton of photos of this actress, and that's who we used for Golden Girl, for example. Uh, for Punchliner, he didn't do the covers. The covers are done by Russ Braun, who
Hmm.
collaborated with Garth Ennis on The Boys and
Hmm.
worked with Nancy
Hmm.
Collins on Swamp Thing. Um, I said to Russ, I would love to do a homage to Kolchak the Night Stalker, but I want to make him a stand-up comedian. And I always thought if they ever were to do a Night Stalker series today, Bryan Cranston would be the perfect actor to be
True.
it. So
True.
Russ did a great Bryan Cranston for my character. But um, I've also had some of my instructors, like Chris Sotomayor, who is the colorist that taught me. He's done the majority of my Moses Militia covers,
Nice. Nice.
coloring the
Cool.
covers. I do all the interiors of all my books, but I want my covers to look as professional as I possibly can.
Hmm.
So I get professionals to always do them. So I had Felix Serrano, who worked on Thief of Thieves with Robert Kirkman. He did a couple of my covers, and so yeah, uh, some people will uh, because Bill Wiley is a professional guy that worked at Marvel. He does things that fit his method of artwork.
Hmm.
Antonio has his, and
Yeah.
both of them bring their strengths to my scripts, which are fantastic.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. As you're writing, I always like to ask about process. Any particular parts of the process that you enjoy or any creative rituals that you have?
Well, initially, what I do is I'll come up with a plot. I'll write a few paragraphs to come
Hmm.
up with what the general idea of the story will be, a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then I will make up a text document that'll number from 1 to 22. And I'll write one line of what every page of my story, the general action will be. Uh, number one, um, we are at a uh, we're at a military base in the Pacific.
Hmm.
And then number two, we find a dead dinosaur in this middle of this military base, and scientists are around him. I just write one line for every page. Page 22, the villain suddenly comes out of the shadows.
Hmm.
Then after I do this one line, I do my plot, I do my one line of action per page. Then I'll go to full script.
Nice.
Generally, I like to stick to 6 panels at the most,
Hmm.
which is something that a lot of writers do. If it calls for more, I'll do it. If it calls for less, I'll do it. And of course, you'll have your full page splash page showing a big big action going on, and I'll write my full script. Then after that, the last step in the process is getting the visual reference material for my artists.
Hmm.
Um, what does the building look like that these guys are meeting at? What is the conference room look like? Here's a meeting room. What does the clothing? What kind of suit is this character wearing? I
Hmm.
try to give them as much as possible so they don't come back at me with questions that slows down their process.
Yeah.
Again, the visual reference of having an actor or actress for every single character. Um, I have all kinds of reference books that I have for planes, for cars, for guns. So I
Hmm.
know exactly the type of guns were used in World War II. There's a very invaluable uh, blog website that I found that has exactly every type of uniform that were used by the Allies and by the Nazis in World
Wow.
War II, because you want that authenticity.
Hmm.
I was at a convention and I just knew someone was going to say this. He came over, he looked at Moses Militia, picked it up, he's going through it, and he's like, okay, you got that uniform right on that German lieutenant. Yeah, oh, you could have missed that belt buckle on this guy, but generally you got it right. And the guy bought every issue because he thought that level of work I went into these books, you know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
starting with the plot, my one page, my one line per page, my full script, and the reference material. And then I'm all set to send all that material to my artist. And then they will send me back rough outlines of how the storytelling will go per page. I
Hmm.
give my feedback, and then they'll go to full pencils, full inks.
Cool, cool. Awesome. Yeah. I love hearing about the process and some of the details of how you capture the authenticity. If I'm a listener out there and I want to find out more, you mentioned conventions, so particular convention spaces that you like to go to.
Yes, I prefer the mid-sized conventions, ones like Baltimore Comic Con,
Hmm.
which I've been going for the last 11 years. I used to really like going to Wizard World in Philadelphia. I need to go back. I don't know if it's Wizard World now, but I would love to go back to Philadelphia. I want to do Chicago. Hartford has some great conventions. The smaller ones are also good to build up your fan base.
Hmm.
Um, and luckily, Moses Militia has built up a fan base. The other way, of course, of getting your work out there is digitally.
Hmm.
So you'll have places like well, uh, Global Comics, I believe it's called. They're a digital platform.
Hmm.
I have to admit that Comixology has been extremely frustrating because in the beginning, when it was independent, Um, I had all my books up there and I
Hmm.
would get steady sales figures back. So when a publisher is considering your work, at first they won't even consider what you're doing. They want to know, A, do you have a fan base? Do you have a following? And do you have sales?
Hmm.
That's what, and social media uh, identity out there, platforms. Unfortunately, while I could proudly boast that Moses Militia had was getting steady sales of 50 per month, I sold over 500 copies combined digitally and self-publishing of the issue of number one through three. When Comixology got bought out by Amazon,
Hmm.
they wiped the entire platform.
Ah.
So you have to resubmit your books and you have to do
Wow.
it through their process. It used to be Comixology was easy. You just upload this PDF of your book.
Hmm.
And there it is. Everybody could see it. They could download it. They could buy it. But with Comixology, you have with Amazon, you have to go through their Kindle process, which is time consuming, very elaborate. They want you to go put it in panel by panel. All my previous sales figures have disappeared now.
Hmm.
So if I want to tell somebody I've sold 500 issues of my first book, I have to show them old emails with these
Yeah.
sales figures. I have no idea what's going on now through Amazon because I have to put everything up all over again. And they're not just taking full PDFs. You have to go panel
Hmm.
by panel. So yeah, it's a slow going process, but digital is the way to get the most exposure.
Hmm.
Um, Also, with conventions, it's a good way to meet people and talk to them personally about your books and to build up that fan base, to do podcasts like yours, to do interviews on blogs and websites like my buddy Izzy with the Izzyverse on YouTube. He's got a great channel that he does a
Hmm.
lot of interviews with self-publishers. Um, that's what you have to do to get your name out there. And who knows? Maybe you can work with the big boys eventually, but you have to keep going. I wouldn't discourage anybody from doing it. Uh, get yourself on Comixology, take the time, but I like to spend my time actually producing the books. I don't have the time to self-promote. I don't have the time to upload things over and over again. I need
Yeah.
to start my own web store, which eventually I know if I just sit down for about a week, I'd probably get it going. That's going to be my next step,
Hmm.
but and start collecting my stuff into trade paperbacks. But that's what the kind of advice I would give to anybody who was trying to break into the business.
Nice, nice. Good to know. And I didn't realize that. I used to do publishing with the Kindle side, but interesting. So glad to get the word out about your work in case people are looking for it. You mentioned Comixology being one of those spaces. I know you have some social media presence, so anything you'd like to mention about that?
I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. Everything is James Babbo,
Hmm.
Babbo. It's good having a very unique name because you don't have to worry about making yourself James Babbo 23 or anything like that.
True, true.
So I'm there. There's jamesbabbo.com where eventually I put all the news of where my books are available and where eventually I will have my web store. One thing I need to mention is if you are a person who wants to start making your own comics, Comics Experience is a good place to go. There are several places that do teach writing.
Hmm.
I'm currently signed up with Scott Snyder's writing course, where
Hmm.
he doesn't so much go into step by step, but he talks about certain things that writers need to know, like how to build character, how to write a one shot, how to do a limited series. Um, so he talks about these things as he's going along, whatever comes to his mind, which is very interesting. But if you want step by step process on how to start writing, basic writing, how to write a script, Comics Experience is a good place to go. All their courses are online. They'll teach you how to write, how to letter, how to color, how to edit, every step of the process. And there are also great books out there. There's a book on writing by Denny O'Neil. Peter David has a book.
Hmm.
There's of course the Marvel Guide to comics, which is the plot driven process that Stanley did with Buscema and everybody. That's worth going on the artist side of it. But yeah, if I love encouraging people to get into comics.
Cool.
I've volunteered my work, my time for people to help out. Friends of mine, I've done coloring for a couple of projects for friends that I know are very talented and just need a little help to get their stuff up there.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I've volunteered my time for them as much as I can.
Awesome. So, well, glad to certainly pay it forward. Glad to have you back anytime to talk about projects as they're coming along and share about your creator community as well. Have we missed anything that you want to make sure to share before we close out?
I uh, I was hesitant about bringing this up, but what the hell?
Uh-huh.
I currently working on a Frankenstein book because Frankenstein's very soon going to be into the zeitgeist with the Guillermo del Toro project that's
Yeah.
coming in the
Mhm.
fall, and I believe there's a second series that's also coming independent of that one. But I'm doing a book about the Bride of Frankenstein
Nice,
where she
nice.
survived. Uh, I'm not. I am not coming off of the film The Bride of Frankenstein. In my story, something catastrophic happened at the time that she was created,
Mhm.
and you don't find out until the very end of the series what that was. But she's the only one that survived this catastrophic event, and we follow her through the centuries as she develops her feelings towards humanity. At first, she just wanted friends as the monster did, but then she finds that humanity is not worth her time
Mhm.
because of the way they treated her. So she's on this quest to recreate the process that made herself so she can have others like her that she can live with.
Gotcha.
So I bring it
Gotcha.
from the 1890s up through the present time where we find whether or not she succeeds. And it's my guiding principle for that book was what Clive Barker always said in interviews. I always want the monsters to win.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
that's always stuck with me as I wrote this. He said this when he was doing Nightbreed, Cabal. So in my book, she's going to win, but you just don't
Nice.
know to what degree. So I've already pitched it to Image. I'm waiting to hear from them. I'm going to pitch it to a bunch of other publishers, and whether or not I get a nibble by the fall, the next time I'm at Baltimore Comic Con or Philadelphia, I will have the first issue of Frankenstein's Blood, which is the title of the book, in hand.
Nice, nice, awesome. Well, glad you shared that and looking forward to seeing how that comes together. James, I appreciate the time. It is an open invitation if you want to come back, and I appreciate the creating as well.
Thanks very much. Glad